This is the shocking story of a woman who had it all: wealth, love, and a picture-perfect marriage until she realized her entire life was built on lies. From the outside, her marriage seemed like a fairy tale. But behind closed doors, her husband was manipulating her. Her doctor was falsifying records. And even her staff was part of the deception. The worst part? She was told she couldn't have children. But the problem was never her. On a quiet spring afternoon, beneath chandeliers and blossoms flown in from half a world away, she stood at the altar, wrapped in lace and hope. To the world, it was a love story, a wealthy heiress choosing a man with no riches, no status, only heart. The media called it poetic. Her friends said she was brave, her father, skeptical. But she believed in the man standing across from her. She gave him her trust, her home, her future, unaware that trust was the very currency he needed to begin. He didn't just say, "I do." He said yes to everything that would come with her name, and everything she would lose because of it. Behind closed doors, her life would begin to shrink. One appointment, one lie, one missing truth at a time. And when she finally discovered what he'd been hiding, it wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity. It was something that changed everything she believed about herself. This is the story of a woman who gave everything to a man who gave nothing back, and how she uncovered a secret, carefully constructed. Even her own body had been used against her. She thought she couldn't have children. That's what the test said. That's what the doctor told her. But it was never about her. You're about to hear her story. But ask yourself this first. If the person who says they love you most is the one quietly destroying you, how would you even know? And when would it be too late to stop them? You'll witness a story that began with love, or what she believed was love, and ended with a truth carefully hidden. It nearly erased her sense of reality. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how trust, once weaponized, can leave deeper scars than any lie. She was told she couldn't have children. The test said so. The doctor confirmed it. Until she found out the truth. The problem wasn't her body. It was his. He knew all along. And worse, he wasn't alone in keeping it from her. The person who manipulated her the most wasn't a stranger. It was someone she'd known since childhood. Someone who'd once stitched her knee after a fall, who'd been there for every cold, every checkup, every milestone. The family doctor. And while she poured her energy into treatments, medication, and the quiet grief of feeling broken, he was spending nights with other women she'd hired, trusted, and invited into their home. Her staff. This is how she found out. How she faced the truth. And how she reclaimed her story in the shadow of a deception that nearly destroyed her. Subscribe so you don't miss what she discovers next. She was the kind of woman who could have had anything. A private education, summers abroad, a family name that opened doors before she ever knocked. But none of those things shaped her the way people expected. She wasn't entitled, she wasn't cold, she was warm, soft-spoken. The kind of person who remembered birthdays, who made time for strangers. Her family owned real estate, land, and shares in companies most people only saw on news tickers. But she still drove herself to work, still made her own coffee. She didn't want headlines. She wanted a quiet life, a real one. And that's exactly what made her vulnerable. She believed deeply that love should have nothing to do with wealth. She once told a friend, "I'd rather marry a man who had nothing and treated me well than someone who had everything and made me feel like nothing." And when she met him, that's what she thought she'd found. He was different from anyone she'd ever dated. No polished accent, no expensive suits. He worked long hours in construction, sometimes 2 jobs at once. He spoke with confidence, not charm. He didn't know the names on her guest list, and he didn't care. He was ambitious, or at least that's what it looked like. They met at a charity fundraiser. He wasn't even a guest, he was part of the event's staff. She complimented his work ethic. He joked about her heels. A week later, he showed up at the gallery where she volunteered. They talked for hours. He listened, He said all the right things. And for a woman who had been pursued all her life for what she had, it felt new to be seen for who she was. Her friends raised questions. Her family expressed doubt. But she told them to stop judging him for not having money. She said she could feel his honesty, that he didn't care about her background, that he actually respected her. They called it fast. She called it fate. Within 6 months, they were engaged. The wedding was something out of a magazine. Custom everything. Over 100,000 roses brought in by refrigerated trucks. Her dress hand-stitched in Paris, his suit tailored at the last minute. There were smiling guests, champagne towers, choreographed dances. Photos of that day would go on to be published in local society columns. The caption read, "Love has no limits." He barely spoke to her sister. And when an old friend pulled her aside to share a heartfelt moment, he interrupted hand at the small of her back, whispering, "We've had enough of the past, don't you think?" At first, the changes were subtle. A few canceled dinners with friends. A tighter schedule managed through a shared calendar he insisted they use. Her assistant replaced with his recommendation. He began making jokes that didn't land. "You're so lucky I'm not like those other guys who'd marry you just for the money. Careful, someone might think I'm your employee. I can't believe I married my boss." She laughed them off at first. But slowly, it chipped away at her. She started questioning herself, apologizing more, pulling away from people who noticed too much. She told herself it was just an adjustment. That marriage was supposed to be hard in the beginning, that he needed time to settle into her world. But without realizing it, she was already stepping out of her own. What happens when the person you trust with your heart begins to control your mind? When every accident starts to feel like intention? When your world gets smaller, but you can't quite explain why? Would you speak up? Or would you keep giving the benefit of the doubt until you had nothing left to give? At first, it was the small things. Missed calls, shorter conversations, fewer shared meals. She told herself it was normal, life settling into routine after the rush of a wedding. Everyone had warned her that the honeymoon phase doesn't last. But what no one told her was that real love doesn't feel like absence. When she brought up children, he changed the subject. At dinner, "Let's just enjoy each other for now. After an argument, we're not in the right space yet. Let's get stable first." In passing, "What's the rush? Isn't this enough for you?" She started to wonder if she was pushing too hard, if wanting a family, something she'd dreamed of since childhood, was selfish. So she stopped asking. But the silence only made the space between them wider. Her friends noticed. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed. The once vibrant woman who used to speak with conviction now second-guessed her own voice. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling. Something wasn't adding up. A week later, he said he'd booked an appointment with her family's physician, just in case. What she didn't know is that he'd already been there. He'd gone alone. And what he heard in that quiet consultation room shook him. A low sperm count. A diagnosis he never expected. A truth that didn't fit the version of himself he'd sold to her, to everyone. He knew that if the truth came out, it could all unravel. The status, the lifestyle, the access. He wasn't willing to lose any of it. And so he made a decision. What was said in that office between him and the family doctor never made it into any official record. A quiet agreement. Or perhaps a forced one. What matters is what came next. The results were reversed. She was told that she was the one who couldn't conceive. She cried for hours that night. He held her, not with love, but with relief. In her pain, his secret was protected. The months that followed changed her. She became quieter. Her eyes searched for answers she could no longer find. She started treatments, hormones, supplements, therapy. She read every article, watched every video. She blamed herself. and he let her. At first, he offered comforting words, but soon, even those faded. He started to say things like, "You're overthinking everything. You're becoming too much. Maybe this is why things aren't working." The words didn't come with yelling. They came softly, methodically, until she started to believe them. He began managing more than just their finances. Her schedule, her wardrobe, her tone. Everything became a negotiation. The woman who once moved through rooms with quiet confidence now waited for his approval before speaking. She told her therapist she felt like a guest in her own life. The cheating begins, and while she fought invisible battles, he found comfort elsewhere. It began with her assistant. Late-night work errands, unexpected meetings, messages deleted seconds after being read. The assistant left suddenly. No explanation, no goodbyes. A few weeks later, it was another staff member, a woman she'd personally hired and trusted, given keys to her home. Their affair wasn't reckless. It was measured, planned. He made sure she never suspected. How far would someone go to hide their own truth? If you couldn't trust your doctor or your husband, who could you trust? And when the people closest to you rewrite your reality, how do you know what's real anymore? What would you have done in her shoes? For over a year, she lived in the shadow of a truth she couldn't name. Not because she was blind, not because she lacked intelligence, but because she trusted. When trust is deep, betrayal hides well. And the people closest to her, the ones who should have protected her, were the ones shaping the illusion. It started with a message. No name, no introduction, just one sentence. "You need to ask your husband about Madison." Madison, her former assistant, the one who left. Suddenly, she read it 5 times, tried to ignore it, but couldn't. The next morning, another message came. This time, it was a photo. Blurry, taken through glass. Her husband, in his car, with someone leaning into the passenger seat. The face couldn't be seen clearly, but the hair, the frame, it looked like Madison. She didn't respond. She forwarded the message to the family doctor. His reply came quickly. "You shouldn't let rumors get to you. Focus on your health." She hadn't mentioned anything about rumors, only a photo. And that's when she knew something was off. She visited the clinic without an appointment, asked for copies of her records, was told they weren't available at the moment. When she pushed, the receptionist stalled. She left the building in silence, drove 2 blocks away, parked, and called someone she never thought she'd need. A private investigator. 2 weeks later, she received an envelope. Inside, a USB. She locked herself in her bedroom, plugged it in, and watched. There was no dramatic reveal, just cold, methodical evidence. Screenshots of emails between her husband and the family doctor. Conversations about altering medical reports. A spreadsheet. Dates. Names. Then came the footage. Hidden camera. Her husband in the guest bathroom with her household manager, laughing, touching, kissing. She paused the video, stood up, walked to the sink, and threw up. She waited for him to come home. He walked in like he always did, dropped his keys, took off his shoes, smiled. Long day? She said nothing, just pressed play. At first, he didn't flinch. Then his jaw clenched. She asked him one question. Why? He gave answers, long-winded ones, blaming her, saying she had changed, saying the pressure of her world had been too much. She listened. And then, when he was done, she placed the printed emails on the table. He picked them up. Read the first one. And that was the moment he stopped lying. What followed was not just a fight. It was the sound of a woman reclaiming her voice. Her rage, not wild but precise. Years of manipulation, all answered in a single night. She left that night. No suitcase, no destination, just a phone in her hand, and silence in her chest. She didn't know where she was going, only that she was never going back. The papers were signed. The divorce was filed. It was clean, swift. No more pretending. No more living in a house built on lies. But for her, the hardest part wasn't the separation. It wasn't even the public fallout or the whispers in the community. It was the realization that her world had been manipulated. Her family doctor, her husband, her employees, all part of a game she didn't even know she was playing. As the divorce proceedings unfolded, the investigation into her doctor began. His medical license was revoked. The charges? Malpractice, fraud, conspiracy. The man who once held the power to heal was now facing the consequences of a betrayal he'd helped orchestrate. Her staff, many of whom had been silent for years, slowly came forward. Their stories ranged from being emotionally manipulated to outright harassment. Some even testified that they, too, had been asked to play parts in the elaborate charade her husband had created. What was once a well-run, respected household now seemed like a facade, one built on falsehoods and twisted allegiances. But her story, it didn't end with the courtroom. She decided to make her truth known, to shed light on everything she had endured. She went public, not for revenge, but for justice. She sat down with a documentary crew. She spoke into a microphone, her voice steady, but every word a heavy truth that had weighed on her for so long. "This isn't just about me," she said. "This is about everyone who's ever felt alone in a marriage, gaslighted into believing they're the problem. This is about reclaiming power. I hope my story can help someone else find their way out before it's too late." It wasn't an easy journey. There were days when the memories crept in, uninvited. Nights when the weight of it all came crashing down. But in time, she began to heal. Therapy helped her unpack years of emotional abuse, years of self-doubt, and years of lost trust. She learned to trust again, not in a man, not in a relationship, but in herself. She surrounded herself with people who saw her for who she truly was, not what they wanted her to be. And as she rebuilt, she found her purpose. The foundation she started became her new mission. "I want to give women the tools they need to leave, to recognize the signs, and to never feel alone again," she said, speaking with newfound clarity. The foundation grew quickly, offering support, therapy, legal aid, a safe space for women who had been through what she had. And for the first time in years, she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor. And in that, she found her peace. As for him, his name became a whisper in the wind. His world, once filled with lies and deception, crumbled. And the only thing left of his legacy? The woman who had rebuilt her life from the wreckage, who had risen from the ashes, a little stronger, a lot wiser, and far more resilient than she ever thought possible. How many more stories like hers are out there? How many women are still hiding in the shadows of their own marriages, too afraid to speak out? If this story hit home, or made you think of someone you know, share it, because sometimes the truth doesn't come until someone dares to speak. Some people lie for survival. Others lie for power. But when love is just another lie, how do you heal? What would you have done in her shoes? Comment below if this story shocked you. Subscribe to get more stories like this. Like this video if you believe the truth always comes out in the end. Where are you watching from? The United States? The United Kingdom? Let me know in the comments section where you were watching from. Thank you for watching.